Hello everybody, Ben Rogers here, the Raptors Digest, reacting to some Toronto Raptors news. NBA champion point guard Kyle Lowry, he's currently training with the USA national team in preparation for that FIBA tournament, so he's keeping busy over the summer, despite the fact a lot of players have dropped out of this FIBA qualifying camps and teams for both the US and Canada, but that could be a story all its own. I know a lot of Canadian basketball fans are frustrated about guys like Andrew Wiggins, Jamal Murray, RJ Barrett not playing, and they have excuses and stuff, but it's unfortunate that all the NBA guys can't play, but regardless, this isn't what this video is about. But Kyle Lowry's training down there, and he had an interview, one of his few interviews he's had since that championship parade and the high of highs of Raptors fandom and, coming off the championship, and he spoke on his future with the Toronto Raptors and his future his expectations for this upcoming season for this team. So we have a lot to break down in this video, but the most nitty-gritty stuff is what's Kyle Lowry's future with this roster, because the Raptors are in a weird situation. We just came off a championship, and usually after a team wins a championship, there's championship expectations for the season after, and at least in the mainstream media, there isn't much attention being given to Toronto being a real title contender, and large part due to the loss of Kawhi Leonard and Danny Green. And that's completely fair. I'm a bit more bullish on the Raptors than a lot of analysts are. I still think we have a really good shot at being a top seed in the Eastern Conference and making a run, but it will certainly be more difficult without one of those top 3 NBA guys. I guess before we segue into Kyle's future, he brought up how he has championship expectations still for the Toronto Raptors coming up this season, and we're going to have a lot of prediction videos, season breakdowns as we inch closer and closer to the regular season, but my early prediction is I still think the Raptors can get a top seed. I look at that roster that we had 2 years ago now with DeMar, Lowry, and the bench mob, and that was the first seed in the Eastern Conference, and I look at this roster we have at this upcoming year, and I think we have a better roster than we had 2 years ago, so I don't see a reason why we could get a top seed again. We were first seed that year, so I'm very intrigued about this current roster, and I'm in agreement with Kyle Lowry. I think there should be championship expectations for the team, maybe not as crazy and as intense as it was last year, as we had that 1-year window with Kawhi, but the Raptors should not be writing the season off and going for the tank like some people thought we should after Kawhi Leonard left. I think we should really still go shoot our shot for this season, see what Pascal Siakam can do as the A1 guy for this team, see what Kyle Lowry and Marc Gasol still have left in the tank. It's going to be a really interesting season. So there's a lot of cool storylines going up for this year, but once again, this isn't a prediction video. Obviously, I'm in agreement with Kyle Lowry about the championship expectations, but he also brought up when the reporter asked him about what his plans are with the future, because Kyle Lowry has 1 year left on his contract, $30 million for this upcoming season, and then he's an unrestricted free agent. I started the podcast with the current Raptors situation because that's going to be a huge role on what the franchise looking to do with Kyle Lowry in the future and what his potential plans will be. But he came out and he said he'd love to be with the Toronto Raptors long term. He loves the city, loves Canada. He's been outspoken about how much he enjoys the city, especially after he signed that second contract. I think Kyle Lowry's fully embraced this team as home. That's what he said in his, I believe, Players Tribune or some sort of article after he signed that second contract with us. And he's always talked about the team. DeMar repped us a little bit more. DeMar was very, very outspoken about how much he loved the city, but Kyle Lowry's been on that same wavelength. So he wants to stay with this team, even though there's not the same level of expectations that they've had for the last few. There's still expectations that we had before, but not that championship window like we had with Kawhi Leonard. He's still intrigued and wants to stay with the Raptors. And that's what he said in that quote. But despite the fact he's an NBA champion, despite the fact, in my opinion, he's the Raptors' GOAT, not the best player necessarily, so to speak. Kawhi's definitely by far the best player, but in terms of longevity, what you've done for the team, and in my opinion, he was the leader of those rosters with DeMar and Lowry. So I look at Lowry as the Raptors' GOAT, but that's completely subjective and not the title of this video. And if you disagree, let me know in the comment section below. I full support if you believe Kawhi, DeMar, Vince, whatever your opinion is. But Kyle Lowry, despite of all that, there are some questions about his future with this team. because he's a 35-year-old point guard. He was injured for a lot of that playoff run. He just recently had surgery on his left thumb, and he's a guy that has had some injury history. And being an older guy, there's some speculation, especially among fans, about do they want him to be the point guard or even a backup point guard for this roster going forward. And I'm going to give my opinion on that now, because the Toronto Raptors, they're a team that has a lot of young players that in the next couple years are certainly going to be given at least a chance. Whether they live up to their expectations or take advantage of their opportunity, there's a lot of players that are going to be given an opportunity to take the reins of the next guys to carry the Toronto Raptors to playoff runs and maybe even a championship. And one of the guys that's going to spearhead that, because I think Siakam's already taken and ran with his opportunity, is Fred VanVleet. He's also on a 1-year contract, and frankly, from every interview I've heard from Fred VanVleet, the way he talks about his career and what his plans are in the future, he's another guy that wants to be in Toronto, but he wants to be a starter in this league. He's recently just only signed a 2-year deal. He's all about betting on himself, and that's completely fair. And what we saw of Fred VanVleet in the NBA Finals, in that Bucks series, he's a guy that could be ready to take on a starting position, whether it's on this season, but the season after. Because I'd be very surprised if we see Kyle Lowry moved this year, unless the team completely fails to do anything this year. I think Kyle Lowry will be on this roster. He won't be traded. He'll be on the roster throughout the whole year and for another playoff run. So in the season after, we have the dilemma of Fred VanVleet or Kyle Lowry. Who do you want going forward with your team? Kyle Lowry will be 34 years old. Fred VanVleet will be entering, his early prime. And I don't think Fred VanVleet will want to be a backup. And I think that was the plan of him signing the 2-year deal, because then he can get the starter money and really have an opportunity to run with this team. Now, before I get in my opinion, there's Fred VanVleet. I'm looking at Fred VanVleet as a pure point guard. I know Nick Nurse has said he might be starting Fred at the 2 anyways, regardless of the season, so that's something in itself. But I think Fred VanVleet wants to be a starting point guard in this league for at least the prime of his career, because that's where he'll most thrive and all that sort of stuff. So I think it's going to be tough to have Kyle Lowry and Fred VanVleet in your backcourt of the future, because they're both about 6 foot. They both do similar things on the court. And a lot of the people that are saying that we should get rid of Kyle Lowry or let him walk next season are saying that Fred should be that next guy. And that's fair. That's a fair opinion to have. But I think a lot of people are writing off Kyle Lowry's game. I think the fact that he is 33, 34 now, people are expecting his game to completely fall off a cliff. And I'm not one of those believers. I don't think that Kyle Lowry's game is going to completely tarnish over the next few seasons. I think he has a lot of years left in the NBA, despite the fact he throws his body around a lot, and he has had an injury history. And the main reason I believe this is because of how he controls the game. Kyle Lowry's impact, even though his box score numbers have kind of dipped as of late in recent years, Kyle Lowry's importance to the Toronto Raptors has not. And the reason for this is how he just runs the offense. He led the playoffs in plus-minus for a reason this year, because when he wasn't on the court, the Toronto Raptors offense, even with Kawhi Leonard, even with Pascal Siakam, even with Danny Green, Marc Gasol, or whatever, the offense couldn't run nearly as smoothly without Kyle Lowry on the court. The way he facilitates, moves the ball, he puts people in places that they need to be. It's invaluable for this Toronto Raptors offense to run. And I think even if he's not as productive in terms of scoring the ball, or his defense kind of falls off a little bit, even though he'll always be a bulldog, I think having that type of player on your roster is going to be extremely valuable. And do I necessarily think he should be the starting point guard for the Toronto Raptors in the future? No. And this is where my opinion and my take is going to come to. I think if Kyle Lowry is willing to take a bench role where he's still a significant member of this team, he's not going to be a guy like Vince Carter or one of those older players that are not getting run or anything. If he's given that 6-man role where he can still be closing games and finishing off games with that Fred Lowry lineup, I think if he's willing to do that, we have to bring him back. He's a player, he's so integral to Raptors history. He's such an integral piece to how we play the game, and he's a productive guy. He can shoot threes, he'll always be able to pass, he'll always be able to facilitate and run this Toronto Raptors team no matter how old he gets. I think it would be very foolish for the Toronto Raptors to just let him walk and go to a different team. Players that are high IQ can stay in the league. They have long longevity. But it holds true for Kyle Lowry, because he'll know how to adjust his game to his older body, and he'll still be a valuable piece. And I think he's a guy that realizes his kind of role with teams. When Kawhi Leonard came in last season, he said, Kyle Lowry was the leader and the number one guy on the roster years before. He said, yo, Kawhi, this is your team. And I think that's what he's going to do with Pascal Siakam and Fred VanVleet as he ages, and maybe after this year, because I think he's going to have one more year where he's the main guy, and Pascal Siakam is going to be probably the A1 scorer, but Kyle Lowry's still the guy that runs the roster. I think he has another year left in him with that, and then he'll probably take a backseat to a guy like Fred or whatever, and still be in that productive position. He won't be a guy that's just in your bench being a leader and a mentor, so to speak, but he'll be willing to pass the torch to the younger guys, and that's my belief. If he isn't willing to do that and he still wants to be a starter and still wants to be a main guy and can go for all-star teams and all that, then I can maybe see where some people will be coming from with wanting to move Kyle Lowry and get him gone, and that's I'd probably lean towards that as well, because Fred will probably want to leave at that point, and the young guys probably, there'll be some clashing, but I don't think that's going to be the case. But let me know in the comment section below. Kyle Lowry, he has been unpredictable over the course of his career, and listeners of the podcast know Kyle Lowry is my favorite player of all time, him and Steve Nash, so I want to see Kyle Lowry stay. I want to see him end his career as a Toronto Raptor. We've had a lot of turnover over this past year. It would be tough to see Kyle Lowry go. DeMar gone, Jonas gone, Bruno gone. I want to see some of those true Raptor legends stay with this team and be around for the new Raptor legends, or the guys that are carving out their Raptor careers and their stories now. I'd like to have Kyle Lowry there to mentor them and be an integral piece to this team, whether or not he's a starter and still a contributing main factor. So that's my opinion. Let me know what you guys think. Do you think Kyle Lowry should stay with the Toronto Raptors? Should the Toronto Raptors want to keep him? Let me know in the comment section below. Check out the Twitter, the Instagram, all that cool stuff. You guys are the best to make this far. I'm signing out. Cheers.